Good afternoon and welcome back. Today I'm going to be whittling on at you about why I prefer gas blowbacks, as well as a few tech tips on how to optimize your experience. I have before me a Tokyo Marui MWS. If you're only going to get one gas gun, this would be the one I'd recommend. I will go into more about that later. I also have with me what should be more familiar to airsofters, a pistol. They work by very similar principles, however, the technical differences between the large and the small does add up into being a fundamentally different experience. Now, before I go on to any details and specifics, I'm just going to start with why I prefer gas blowbacks and why I've just sold a perfectly functional electric in favour of getting a gas blowback. Now, the main one, the sensation and the feel. I have found that the immersive experience using a gas blowback vastly outdoes it compared to an electric. After all, with a gas blowback, it makes a lot of noise, the gun ricochets backwards and forwards, recoils backwards and forwards, and you have to manage your ammo as if you're in a live scenario. These typically get 30 to 40 rounds compared to your standard battle maracas with 500 plus. Now, that's not to say that electrics are crappy. They do have their place. They're typically a little bit cheaper to run. And if everything goes well, they're much lower maintenance. However, that's not been necessarily my full experience of it. Electrics have the upsides and the downsides, as do gas blowbacks. Now, those of you who are familiar with airsoft will be fully aware of how an electric gun works. It uses electricity to get to spin a motor, which pulls a piston, turns cogs, which pulls a piston, which then pushes air through a cylinder, narrows it down through a nozzle, and pushes a BB out the end. These work quite differently, but end up with the same result. One of the other things I prefer of a gas blowback for over an electric is if something does go wrong, I can very easily disassemble these. And just like that, we have field stripped her. Now, the way these work, this magazine is a gas reservoir. I have a disassembled magazine here. The way they work, you put your BBs in through the front, and in the middle, in the back, is a big reservoir for your gas. Now, we will discuss what specific gases work where and how, but that is for later. The way these work, you stick in gas either in the bottom, or if you've got a VFC, you stick it in through a filler valve in the side. The specific method doesn't matter, just as long as you're putting it in the magazine. Then, when the firing pin, which in this is there, is let go by the trigger mechanism and strikes that there, gas comes out of the top and then in through the bolt. As you can see, we have the bolt here. When it is in battery, which is when it's in alignment with the gun and it is fully shut, that hole, that inlet there, is what allows gas out of the magazine and into the system. A bunch of it will go forwards and then push the valve inside forwards, sealing it up. The rest of the gas then goes backwards, which then reciprocates, resetting the trigger mechanism and then feeding a fresh BB into the chamber. It's fairly straightforward. It's mechanically simple, which is why I quite like it, being a bit of a simpleton myself. If anything goes wrong with this, if I have the spare parts, it's not necessarily a field issue, but it is, certainly for me, at least a trivial fix. I just replace the part and go on, or shave the parts to fit. Now, as you can see, that's field stripped nice and easy. The other advantage is some of the guns have a lockback on empty, which tells you, oh hey look, I'm empty. It gives you the much more realistic experience all round compared to an electric. Now you can get electrics with some of these features, however they are difficult and much more prone to mechanical failure, especially electric blowbacks. I'm not so keen on electric blowbacks, they only seem to break in my experience. This specific platform is excellent. The MWS is, I'm not here to just shill the MWS to be honest, but it is straightforward, it's simple, and unless you break it, it's not going to have a problem. They come out the box just working fine. Now, to assist in the image, well, the understanding of how the mechanisms work inside the trigger fire control group, I have here the fire control group from a G3A3 by WE. If you are a long-time viewer, I say long-time viewer as if I do this regularly, this may seem familiar. I've done a video on replacing the fire control group. Now, the way this works, when you pull the trigger and everything is ready to go, the trigger will release the hammer, pushing the firing pin forwards, and then, as it goes forwards, the firing pin will be locked into place to ensure that an equal amount of gas is delivered every single time, as opposed to the valve knocking the firing pin backwards and disrupting the flow. The way this one works, and they all work in similar principle, although the exacting ways vary from gun to gun. When the bolt comes back, it pushes the hammer down into place. It will then have a first sear stage where nothing you do will cause the hammer to drop. This is so that way the gun will actually be in battery by the time, well, when the hammer comes down again. In this case, the bolt pushes this forwards, which I'll turn it over so you can see better. As it gets pushed forward, it gets raised a little bit. This puts it onto a second stage, which means the trigger then activates the system. This lever on the side here is a gas knocker lock. Sorry, valve knocker lock, not a gas knocker lock. This is what keeps the consistency between shots more consistent. This here is a little lever that goes on the side. When the magazine is empty, it pushes up and it deflects the valve, sorry, the firing pin even, not the valve. So that way when it is empty, instead of shooting, you get a click for guns that don't have a hold open on empty feature, such as the G3. To assist in visualizing that, I have the mags here for it. When the magazine is empty, you can see the follower here, there's no BBs in there. It pushes this lever up, which then pushes that up and deflects the firing pin away from the valve. Now, how do the magazines work exactly? I mentioned earlier we have the reservoir in here. When the firing pin hits here, inside is an outlet valve. Now, not every outlet valve looks the same. This is for a G3. When it strikes there, it pushes the assembly inside forward, which allows gas outwards and up through the hole there. This hole, when the rifle is in battery, should be completely flush with the inlet valve on the nozzle, although that's not for that rifle. Like that. Should get a nice comfortable seal. These should not be oiled, although if they are going into storage they should be greased just to stop them from degrading. As you can see, nice and tight. Now, how do the actual nozzles work? I have two nozzles here for display. This is a nozzle from a G3 and this is a nozzle from an L85. They look very much the same, although they differ in function very slightly. As you can see, they're different lengths. One's got a flat top. That is immaterial to the functioning. As long as you get matching nozzles, that's the important thing. They are made up of two pieces, a front end and a back end. The back end is where your seal is. This rubber O-ring round here is what gets the gas efficiency seal to get your system to work right. And the front end is what strips the BB off and provides the power straight through the nozzle into your barrel. What just fell out there is the rocket valve. This is how your airsoft gun knows when to stop pushing gas forwards and start pushing it backwards. As you can see, we have a spring here. When it is in the default position, it is pushed to the rear and rests on these little tabs here. Just make sure you can see them. Yep. As soon as the gas starts flowing, it starts to get pushed forward. As you can see, we have no holes in the back. This goes into the front end, and then it will seal up the nozzle and force all the gas backwards, starting the reciprocative action of the rifle. Here we have an inlet valve. These are the valves that go in the bottom. These are my absolute enemy because they are, while they are very straightforward and simple, they are the most common source of leaking that I have encountered. I'll get to tips for that when we get to the tip section at the end. And as for the rubber O-rings that are used in these guns, they are common, ordinary rubber O-rings. The important thing is that you get one that matches the size of your weapon rather than trying to get the exact right one. This little bag of 15 cost me, I think it was like £4 posted. Whereas if you try and go back to the manufacturer, they're going to charge you, 10 to 15 quid for an O-ring plus shipping. So you can, as long as you match the size, just get any old rubber O-ring from your plumb base or whatever plumbing shop is near you. Now, you might have noticed that I have two very similar looking magazines, and I mentioned earlier that they are for different platforms. One of the biggest difficulties with gas blowbacks is if you are sourcing parts, make sure that they are for the correct platform, because this is a magazine for the Tokyo Marui, and this is a magazine for a WE M4 platform. As you saw earlier, this just slots straight in, and it falls straight out. However, as you can see, it does not fit in that gun. It is important to make sure that you pick the right magazines for your gun. Get them for the correct brand and you'll be sorted. A lot of brands have third-party magazines. As long as they are compatible, that is the important part. If it doesn't seem like it's going to fit, it probably won't. So don't force it. Now, moving along the table, I've mentioned the sort of mechanics on how they work. One thing that trips a lot of people up is selecting gas. Now, there's a lot on the market. Don't mind my clumsy ass for throwing stuff around. Here I have a sample of some gases. I have here this Predator Maintenance Gas 144A, this Ultra Air Green, no silicon, Nuprol Green with silicon, Vorsk V6, and Ultra Air Red. Now, there is a lot that goes on and into gases, but there is 4 fundamental categories of gas. There is what's known as white or blue gas, depending upon who is selling it. For us today, Abbey have put it in a green container, frustratingly. This is your lowest pressure gas. This is guns that are designed to run off this are basically exclusively for the Japanese market, where they have much stricter laws than in the United Kingdom. Their weapons cannot have the same same power levels, and they must operate on lower, more carbon neutral gases, which they've considered 144A to be a lower carbon emission gas. This operates at around about 110 psi at room temperature, which is, for those who haven't been drilled in a science lab, it means 25 degrees at 1 atmospheric pressure. This will provide you about 110 to 120 psi of power. This is only useful when it starts to get hot. I personally wouldn't use blue or white gas unless it's above 30 degrees, at which point I'm double questioning whether I'm going airsofting. This specific bottle, however, is Predator maintenance gas. This has a lot of silicon-based oil lubricant in it. This is not for operating your gun. First off, it's a lot more expensive than the other choices. This little bottle was about £12 versus similar size bottle, as you can see, £12 on the label. The other reason is the excess grease in this will result in poor performance in the short term from your rifle. What it does is it will clog up your hop rubber or your hop bucking and cause the friction to not be there for your BB. However, this is a pretty useful gas if you are going to be storing a gun for an extended period of time. What happens with the excess grease and oil inside the gas is it will sit on your rubber seals inside your magazines and stop them from deteriorating quite as quickly. All of this stuff, all of these guns, they're made of physical materials. Eventually, they will break down. So maintenance is an essential part. Those of you who come from an electric gun background may go, but my gun's lasted for years. Yes, yours has, but it won't last forever. It will need some maintenance eventually. Teeth strip, electric go. I've had my hands in more than a couple of five-plus-year-old guns that have decided that they aren't going to work anymore. But yes, white stroke blue gas is the lowest pressure. It is only for hot weather. It's not in Britain what we would traditionally use. Then I have this Ultra Air green gas and Newpol green gas. The Newpol green is probably one of the most popular in the country, competing with Ultra Air and Vorsk. This has a bit of oil-based lubricant in it, silicon lubricant, so it's not going to perish anything. This is put in to, again, try and increase the lifespan of your seals. However, with the downside of after a few magazines, you may find that your hop-up is not kicking the BB up as much as you quite want it to. That is why I typically use green gas without silicon. This operates at around about 140 psi, 135 to 140 psi at room temperature. So it is, well, it's on the lighter end, but it's typically what most guns will want. My MWS has been more than happy with this at 5 degrees. If anybody tells you that you can't use gas guns in the cold weather, they have outdated information. Green gas is the most common, it's the most popular. If you go to the right place, you can get this stuff specifically for quite cheap. You can replace green gas with plumber's propane and bottled propane. However, I've not got the setup, so I'm going to rely on these for the short term, for the foreseeable. Propane is almost identical to these gases. It operates at the same pressure. However, it doesn't lack any of the other mixtures and additives that the airsoft gases have. If you use any brand of gas through your gun, your warranty will continue to be honourable. But if you put in a non-airsoft gas through it, it is quite likely that if anything goes wrong, the manufacturer will tell you to sod off, basically. Now, the next gas we have this Vorsk Orange, or V6, and this Ultra Air Red. These are typically considered to be winter gases. These operate at a much higher PSI. As you can see, we actually have it on the bottle this time. These operate at 175 to 178 PSI. I would not take the label as gospel. I would plus minus a few PSI. These are for colder weather or less efficient guns. They operate to a much higher pressure. They will put more force through your system. If I operate my MWS with this high pressure gas, it does not sound happy. It sounds like it's having a terrible time the entire time. Now again, one of these has lubricant added and the other one does not. The lubricant added versus not added is entirely a personal choice. I prefer not to have it, but a lot of people do prefer to have it. Now, a lot of you may have heard that you need different weight of BBs for gas blowbacks. That is true. I found in my experience electrics are typically happiest with 2 5s, which is, well, I keep this bag around for my electric machine gun, or if I'm letting somebody borrow my electric SCAR when it wants to work. My recommendation for most gas blowbacks is 3 2s. Those of you who are running Tokyo Maruis may find that 3 2s don't quite hop as well. This can be adjusted by upgrading the hop booking inside the gun. I personally have found it to hop 3 2s pretty happily, but also I've had maybe 10,000 rounds through my M4 and 1 stoppage and 1 breakage, which were both, well, one was a ricochet that landed inside the... One of them was the jammiest ricochets ever, because as my rifle was reciprocating, a BB went in there and got mashed up in the bolt face. I mean, what are the odds of that, right? The other one was the nozzle return spring breaking. As I said earlier, these guns are made out of physical materials. They eventually wear out and break down. This spring here returns the nozzle to the reset position in the bolt as it reciprocates. If it breaks, it's a very simple replacement. You can get the springs fairly cheaply. Anyway, the BBs, I'm not shilling for Razor here. They just so happen to be what I have. In fact, this one is full of a third-party brand of 3 2s. The important part is the quality of them, not the brand. Now, if you're working in a unit, my recommendation is you come together to consensus to see what your guns work best on. If you're sharing a platform such as the Bundeswehr unit I'm in, we all use the WEG3s. We all use 3.0s with green gas in them. The British 1990s unit with the L85s that we have, we're all using, well, I think he wants us to use 3.0s, but I'm still going to be putting in 3 2s. Again, with green gas. That way, if one of us has an issue with our magazines running out or gassing out, or much more likely us just running out of ammunition, one of us can go, oh, hey, yeah, I see you're out, here you go. And we can just swap mags nice and easy. Now, I'm saying now a lot. Right, so we've discussed the gas, we've discussed the BBs, we've discussed how they work. One of the things that I do want to look at is one of the downsides to gas blowbacks. An electric is a sealed unit. The entire time the gun is just sealed. Unless it goes for a swim or there's a big design flaw that allows dirt in, the only time you need to maintain them is sort of once a year or once every couple of years. They need disassembling and the gears oiling up. Gas blowbacks require a lot more maintenance than that. However, as a rule of thumb, the maintenance is fairly straightforward. Starts with some tissue. I'm not going to go through barrel maintenance because I'm going through specifically gas blowback maintenance here. If you want barrel maintenance, I'll make a video on that. So I'll put those over there. What's needed? Some sort of towel, some sort of oil or grease. I use Abbey Gun Solutions silicone gun grease because it is available and easy to get. Again, the brand doesn't matter so much as long as it's what works in your rifle. And oil as well, because not every part of your gun can be greased easily. However, just for standard sort of week to week or game day to game day maintenance, my M4 here I'm going to use as a very quick example. Step 1, breaker open. Out comes the bolt. Tissue, just wipe down all the working surfaces. Anywhere that the finish has been worn off, just wants a wipe down. This prevents a build-up of materials, especially on a new gun. The gunk and grime you get off a new gun is going to be largely that material, the powder coating or the paint coating, or the, if you're really lucky, blacking and bluing, degrading, being shaved off by moving parts. You want to get rid of it to reduce the wear on the rest of the gun. Your oil and grease is supposed to lubricate. If you leave oil and grease where surfaces are wearing out, what you're making is a polishing paste. Once you have wiped down the bolt, anywhere the bolt travels, once again a wipe down. There you go, there's some gunk on there. Once you've wiped it out, that was a very quick wipe out, be as detailed as you want. You then grab yourself your grease and something to apply it with. This came out of the New Prol weapon maintenance set. Entirely optional. It's a good kit. Anywhere that you have bare surfaces from wear wants a little brush of grease. If you are going into a winter game, grease is not always advisable as it can become too viscous, in which case you can look to oil, or you can look to thin your grease with a little bit of oil to make it a little less viscous. Inside your nozzle, you only ever want to use oil except around the rubber O-rings. This improves the ability for it to reciprocate correctly. Applying oil is very straightforward. It's not rocket science. Get yourself a little dripper bottle and then just a couple of drops and then just work it in. I don't know if the microphone is pulling that up properly, but it certainly from my end sounds happier. Part of the key functioning and the reason why we have a spring for the nozzle is the way it's supposed to work. This system builds pressure behind the rocket valve the entire time the bolt is reciprocating. Your nozzle should be sticking in battery until it is fully retracted, and then it should be snapping back. If it is not doing that, we will get into troubleshooting. We'll discuss that in the troubleshooting section. You'll know you have a good gasket. You know that the booking is a good seal based on how far back you have to pull before the nozzle is released. If your nozzle is not sticking like that, again, we'll get on to that in the troubleshooting section. However, wiping the grease out of that should do it. That's something for me to look at in the troubleshooting section. Anyway, keeping the pace on the video, let's get to the next topic. Essential maintenance items. Some sort of small screwdriver set and Allen key set. Preferably one you don't mind using as a punch, as if you need to do any maintenance. The pins are quite small. If you see there, that's a pin that holds the assembly together. Doesn't matter if it looks like this set or it looks like this set. It's immaterial as long as it does the job of undoing screws and acting as a punch. This is a outlet valve key. This assists you in removal of the outlet of a magazine, which I can demonstrate with one of my G3 magazines. It's specifically keyed to outlet magazines. You don't need to do this very often. Once a year is typically enough, or if the gun starts to display issues with gas retention, which that magazine apparently wasn't. Once you've got the torque off it, you can just unscrew it like that. And there you go, the outlet comes out. Now I suppose that brings me quite nicely on to one of the other difficulties that gas magazines and gas guns have. I'll just put that back in. One of the difficulties that gas guns face is basic physics. Now, write it in the comments if you know before I say it. What happens when you have a liquefied gas that turns into a gas over a short period of time? Answers in the comment section. Pause the video if you have to. That's right, it gets cold as hell. I mentioned earlier operating temperatures. This magazine is now very cold. It was previously about 18 degrees. However, now, if I wipe my finger over it, you can see it's got, you might be able to see, it's got condensation forming on it. This is because it is now below freezing. When the magazine starts to get cold, the pressure on your gases starts to drop commensurate with it. So where if you're at 135 psi with your green gas at 25 degrees, if your magazine's now 10 degrees, you're typically below 105 psi, if I remember the chart correctly, which puts you on the efficacy of white gas. The way to get around that is to not overshoot the gun excessively. There you go. You can see the condensation forming on there if I hold the light right. Don't shoot the gun excessively in one go without changing magazines. And if you are in the cold, keep your magazines close to your body. A typical way I see it done is with a Chicom type harness underneath a jacket. Put it inside the Chicom, warms up to your body temperature because your jacket is protecting against the cold. And then when you come to use it next, it is warmed back up. A properly efficient gas system should get between 2 to 4 full magazines per gas charge. Now, back to the maintenance. When you are doing any cleaning of parts, unless you're doing a deep clean, you do not require solvents to clean the gun. However, when you do clean the gun, I recommend a softer solution, such as this Nuprol oil remover, rather than more harsh firearms cleaning chemicals, because where you have rubber seals, the firearms cleaning chemicals will perish them mega fast, turbo quick. However, this stuff is specifically formulated for airsoft guns, and so this, which, I mean, obviously it looks quite thick and viscous, this stuff is designed not to destroy your rubber seals. And it does wipe off remarkably well. Anyway, moving around the table. A common screwdriver. This one I'm quite happy with because it comes with all these bits, and this one is ratcheting. For the rare time I need a screwdriver. If you see me out in the field and I have this in my hand, you may use it, but you may use it in front of me because I'm not having my Allen keys or screwdrivers get stolen again. If you take one of these or a screwdriver kit like this airsofting, do not let other people wander off with them because you will never see them again. Now, let's get on to some essential upgrades to your platform. Gas guns, because of the variety of pressures and the operating conditions that you can find yourself in, you may find that the gun comes out the box, like my G3A3 did, a firearms offence. When it came out the box on green gas, it was shooting about 470 FPS on green gas in autumn, which is, for those of you who do know, is well above the CQB limit for airsoft guns in the UK. The limit being 350 with .2s. Without any input, without any assistance, without knowing what I was doing. I was trying to operate off of white gas, which was so low powered it didn't reciprocate the gun properly. It stopped me from actually enjoying the gun, because I would go out, I'd get half a magazine, and then I'd need to gas up. Using a higher pressure gas turned the weapon into an offence that I couldn't use, especially given I couldn't semi-auto lock it. I'd need to get a new safety selector for that. Somebody came to me and said, "Oh, have you got an adjustable MPAS in it?" Well, what's one of them? Well, it's this little thing here. You might think, ooh, that looks a bit like the rocket valve. Yeah, that's because it is just like the rocket valve. Works in exactly the same way, except it's got a platform at the bottom which is adjustable. You adjust it with this key and something inside, like a little screwdriver, to hold the cage still, and then you rotate it. This plate still sits on the back here. Damn it. This plate still sits on the back here. However, as you turn it, you may notice that this gap here, where my thumbnail is, expands and contracts. When it is in this configuration, it is putting out the maximum output of power. And when it is in this configuration, it is putting out the least amount of power, potentially to the point where the gun will not actually have any gas going forwards and it will just reciprocate backwards. This particular one is made by RA Tech. It's decent enough, but it's not as easy to operate. In fact, the camera might be picking it up. It's got loads of scratches around it. This is where I have had to jam screwdrivers into the nozzle to rotate it. For some platforms, such as the WE M4 platform and subsequently the L85 platform, they have this locking nozzle, which is much better. You adjust it in the same way, goes in there, and then you rotate it. However, this one has it locked in place, so you don't need to jam anything inside to operate it correctly. So, we've just covered the NPAS, the adjustable negative air pressure system. One last look at what we are going to be doing, what we're talking about, is some troubleshooting. Now, I've said that an essential upgrade for most gas guns is one of these. If you have a WE rifle, I'm about to be very unflattering, but they are not made. The externals are very beautiful. They're very well made. The internals, however, are made of less fine materials. We have here the hammer that came out of my G3 and the hammer that came out of my housemate's AK. Now, you might have noticed I used singular tenses rather than plurals for what is clearly 2 parts per hammer. Yes, that's right. The internals are made out of some sort of aero bar. If we can get that, I'm sure you can see there's bubbles in that metal. These are made out of pot metal, especially where the G3 has so much mass above the striking point, which you can see there, that's where it strikes the firing pin. It will eventually wear out and snap. The AKs, I've not done any deep analysis in this, but it looks to me a lot like there is a design flaw with this groove here, where the spring goes, resulting in a fracture around that groove. This does not necessarily happen with every single WE rifle. However, this has happened to every WE, well, this has only happened to me, to WE rifles. Again, as you can see, there's the grain of the metal is, well, you might be able to see on the camera, the grain of the metal is poor, the crystals large, and the structural strength terrible. My recommendation is you do what I've done with my G3 and you upgrade to a steel fire control system. A steel fire control system will not necessarily see every single component in there upgraded. However, this is made out of a material striking other materials. if you upgrade your fire control group, my recommendation is you get a new hammer and firing pin at the very least. This is going to strike this. If I'd used the original material with this, well, one of them would have started to deform, and my money's not on the stainless. Well, it's not stainless steel. I can't remember what steel it is. Resulting in the firing pin would have been fractured and broken by now, whereas because I've upgraded this commensurate, it is now completely fine. As you can see, it just makes a click. It is not going click. That sounds expensive. Now, if you have a rifle that is especially spicy, and even if it is so spicy that this cannot adjust on its own, adjust the gun to the point that it is of a low enough pressure that you can operate it, somebody out there has made these. These are known as LFS, or low flow system discs. These operate in a fairly basic way. They restrict the airflow a little bit more out of the end of the nozzle. To install these, it's very straightforward. You stick it on the end of the spring of your rocket valve or your impasse, and then put it in there. The downside to these is it makes it difficult to adjust the impasse, so if you find the weather has improved, you may, well, if the weather gets worse, you may need to remove the low flow disc, or if you want to just adjust it, it will no longer accommodate the tool to adjust it. You are much better addressing the barrel length than you are getting a low flow disc, but they are there. They're relatively convenient. Once they're in, they keep the flow lower, but they do make your rifle a little less adjustable. Again, I would look to get a shorter or a less tight barrel rather than putting a low flow disc in. Also, these low flow discs are not cheap. I think I paid £12 for 3 of these, one of which is still in somebody else's rifle if I recall correctly. What fun. What fun. We all have fun in games here, don't we? This has been disassembled for instructional sake. This is an old nozzle. That's a stock new nozzle. I upgraded to this locking nozzle for ease of adjustment. The rifles all work in the same principles as the pistols. If you've got much experience with a standard pistol, the actual operation of the airsoft of the gas blowback rifle should be very familiar, just on a larger scale. The biggest nuance between the two, I would suggest, other than the size, is loading the magazines. As you might see, you cannot access the follower on either of these magazines. You cannot push the follower down and then insert the BBs. These are a right blighter to load. I once loaded 10 of these MWS mags by hand. I did not have a good time. Once you get that first one in and the magazine disconnector is fully down, you can't really push the BB down any further without wearing out your fingernails and fingers. And once you get to 30, or once you get past about 15, this is a difficult magazine to load. I spent half an hour loading 10 magazines because I did not have a speed loader, and the speed loaders that they had on site were cheap crap and did not work right. I thoroughly recommend these dinosaur loaders from WE, not because they are a dinosaur and they look cool, but because they are the best speed loaders I have encountered on the market for loading gas magazines. Now, a lot of you may be familiar with standard speed loaders. Look like this. You stick it in the top of your electric magazine and you crunk, 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 crunk for about 5 minutes before it fully loads. The difference you may notice is the nozzle adapter on the end. The one on my WE one is, as you can see, worn out by the plastic stress marks, but these will work well after the sides have gone. You just need to be more precise with it. The way these work, same as your pistols. You put it into the top there. The specific angle will vary based on the weapon platform that you're doing. but I always keep my finger on top of the nozzle to enable easy reloading. With one of these loaders, every magazine just accepts the BBs without complaint or issue. You can even use these to load your pistol magazines just as easily. Although if you've got a double stack, I recommend you pull the follower down so you can more accurately monitor exactly how they're stacking, lest you have the dreaded gappy teeth configuration. Now, let's start a new video about my WBL85 and the ordeal that has been. Psych! I lied! People lying on the internet? Never! So, this one's a general troubleshooter, this one. If you're sat there going, oh, my gun's really inefficient. I can't get more than a magazine or a magazine and a half before I need to recharge the gas. This is most likely because you have a poor seal on your nozzle at the rear. If you get yourself one of these Nuprol maintenance sets, again not sponsored, but it's just a good set, you'll get this blue putty with it. You can do this with Blue Tack to test if you've got a good seal on this gasket here. Grab some of this putty, fill the inlet, pull it out, plug the outlet, and watch how quickly it'll reset itself. If your seal is good, it will take a moment before it returns. If your seal is poor, as I suspect it is in this G3, although I might have fixed that last time, it will reciprocate quickly. Much quicker, it's a little bit less gas efficient. It's going to go through magazines of gas much quicker than if the seal is good. Now this putty is not an airtight seal. It is not designed for determining if you've got a good seal or not. It is, however, a quick litmus for you to go, this one is reciprocating slowly when plugged, this one's reciprocating quickly. I will improve my gas efficiency by improving the seal. The best case scenario, you just need to apply a crap load of grease around the seal. Let's do a side-by-side comparison on this. As you can see, the G3s is reciprocating much faster, implying that the seal is not quite as good. The first thing you want to do is make sure that there is an ample amount of grease around the seal here. And if that is not cutting it, what you want to do is either replace it with another O-ring, and I wouldn't do this without a spare O-ring on hand. You can grab a small flathead, tease the ring out ever so slightly, and stretch it. What this does, by stretching it out a little bit, is increase the quality of the seal and slows the airflow from around it. Those of you who are counting frames, because I know there's some nerd out there inclined to do that, we can see how quickly it displaces, how quickly it resets now. About the same speed. I'm not sure I've got that sealed correctly. Let's try that again. Oh yeah, you're getting all of the outtakes on this. I don't do none of that editing nonsense. You get one take wonder. There you go. You can see it's a little bit slower than it was. That has just increased the gas efficiency pretty substantially, reducing the amount of gas that is going to be needed for the rifle to operate properly. It means it will run better in colder weather than it did before, and it will, most importantly, save me dosh, because these are not bloody cheap. One can use other gases, as I said earlier. I would recommend against that, certainly at first, get a bit more experience handling gas systems, and if you don't have an outdoors to store it, you may be in breach of health and safety regulations. Officially, don't do it. Now, to the meat and potatoes of why I'm making videos like this. This is a WE L85 that I bought second hand. This has been a complete nightmare. This looks like every other WE L85 that you'll ever see on the market, and well, I'm sure it started off that way. I bought this second hand from somebody who's going to remain unnamed. However, those who know. This rifle has been a blessing in disguise in that regard. I have learned so much about upkeep, maintenance and improvements to gas blowback weapons as a result of this rifle. I struggle to put it into words. However, this has been a pain in my arse. This is the bag of spare parts that my G3 has generated across its lifetime, including spare parts that were picked up preemptively, such as the springs at the bottom are the hammer control springs. Those were bought just to sort of have spares. I've got a couple of nozzles. These two actually still need to make it to their owners. They're paid for by someone else. I mean, you can see spare hammer, spare fire selector. Yeah, just a couple of bits here and there have broken, been needed to be replaced. Spare valve for the sake of it. Here is all the parts, more or less, that my L85 has generated in the last year. If you ever modify one of these guns, please, for the love of God, use your goddamn brain. Think before you start drilling into it. This bolt is the original. This is the version 2. You can tell because it's got a plate on the back, which acts as a force absorber and, well, a strike plate to protect the soft aluminium of the bolt. This was a donor Gen 1. As you can see, it's not got the strike plate on the back, although you can see the damage of where I put a strike plate on temporarily. The problem with the Gen 1 was the recoil springs there as the gun reciprocates. Well, I'm sure you can see I'm having to put force through it just to get the bolt to slide. This is because as these springs smash against that surface there, it peens the surfaces here inwards. I had filed those in to stop them from being so obstructive, but apparently the brief time I used it caused them to be a problem again. This bolt, however, was a problem from the word go, because the previous owner decided to convert this into an A1 rifle. He had a choice. He could either drill out there so that it no longer fits the original keyed A2 charging handle. As you can see, there's no security there. If I compare it to this brand new from the manufacturer, this bolt would lose this charging handle. So every third time I shot it, it was the ghettoest rifle to operate because I'd have to pull a pin out of the gun to charge the damn rifle. The reason why the previous owner did that dremeling out, not with a pillar drill either, is because the A1 charging handle has a slightly different shape on this part of it. I have since misplaced the A1 charging handle, so instead you'll have to just take my word when I say alter the handle, not the bolt. The bolt is, sure, it's an airsoft gun. However, this piece of aluminium represents about £60 in, plus shipping to replace, whereas the charging handle is an obsolete historical... It's not even an artifact. There's enough of them in the bloody Leeds Royal Armouries for us to have to worry about historical preservation and all that. Shave down the bolt, so the charging handle, not the bolt. Also, bringing on to materials. Match materials as closely as you can. One of the other difficulties that I had with the original bolt is the charging handle is made out of a pretty sturdy steel. There's a lot of flaws with the original L85A1, but the charging handle being made out of a hard stainless steel is not one of the issues that it had. I mean, there was issues with the shape of it and how it was deployed and all that sort of stuff, but the material quality was not one of them. This is aluminium. I'm no metallurgist PhD, but the aluminium is just a spot softer than stainless steel. As the charging handle wobbles around, as it will want to do, because this is a loose piece on the side of a reciprocating bolt, it will wear the aluminium down and out, resulting in this oval shape, assuming of course the previous owner didn't use a Dremel or use his Dremel to make that an oval shape in the first place. As a result, this charging handle would constantly lock up the gun. It would rotate slightly, lock the gun. It would eject the replacement charging handle, lock the gun. If you buy a second-hand airsoft gun, please try and buy it from someone reputable. And definitely try to see the gun before you buy it. If you buy a second-hand gun, I have one question which will easily determine whether the previous owner looked after the gun or not. And that is to ask them what grease did they use in the mechanisms. The reason for that question, if they can tell you what grease, they almost certainly took reasonable care of it. If you ask me, I'll tell you, oh, it's Abbey silicone grease, or Nuprol grease, or whatever brand or manufacturer you want. If somebody argues with you as to whether oil or grease is better, what you have is an autistic gun nerd who is trying too hard, and they've either over-modified their gun to the point of non-functioning, or they have taken pristine care of their weapon. If they go, I don't know, just whatever, I guess, they've probably taken a moderate amount of care, but you're probably going to have to replace something. And if they look at you blankly, go, what do you mean grease it? Don't buy it. Just don't buy it. When I got this rifle, it was... Well, my housemate and I opened it at the same time. And as I opened it up, my heart sank. Because this nearly new rifle had grease this colour. Now, this is this colour because I have in here a bottle of oil which comes out the bottle black. I don't know why. Abbey just decided that they've got a range of black grease and oil. I don't like it so much because that oil is a bit too viscous to be good oil, and it is a bit too thin to be grease, so I don't like it very much. It also leaves your guns looking absolutely filthy every time you apply it. When this rifle turned up with grease that was black, grease applied how the manufacturer likes to apply them, I knew that it had never once been cleaned out in its entire life. As you can see, this rifle is scuffed the hell up inside and out. I have taken this out on 3 game days in total. This means that the previous owner did a lot more firing than he said he did. He also disassembled some of it in very funky ways, because this faux lever here came without the spring and just rotates freely. I've put a spring in, but I've not put it in properly, so I intend to get the English Kiwi bolt catch 3D print added to it when English Kiwi responds to my email. This isn't just a bitch fest about this rifle, much though it might seem like it. There is a lot of merit to this rifle. It has a very hefty, realistic feel to it. It certainly feels similar to the Cadet GP rifles I had back when I was in Cadets. It operates in very much the same way. We have the dust cover that opens itself. I mean, it should do. We have the bolt that reciprocates in accordance with how the real thing does, more or less. It's not quite full travel, but you have to sacrifice something for it being a toy rather than a legal firearm. We've got the correct AR-18 style dual rod spring system. And then we have the internals, which operates more or less like the real thing. We've got the hammer. We have the make sure it's in battery lever. And then a long bar that leads from the trigger to the hammer. And a safety. All runs nice and well. Those of you who are getting one of these, you may consider, you've just shit-talked the material quality of the WE weapons. I'm going to go and get myself a steel control group. It's all nice and well. However, the WE L85 operates off of their V2 fire control group, which is not compatible with their V3 fire control group. I have here one such fire control group and spare pins. This hammer might look fairly similar. You know, we've got the wheel in the top, I've got lip there to clasp the trigger mechanism. This is, however, unfortunately, significantly longer than the original hammer, and as a result, it does not fit right. If we just compare visually, they are at different proportions, they're not compatible. Please, for your own mentality and your own mental health, do not try and make a V3 hammer fit a V2 system. In terms of performance, now that I have spent a year and about 200 quid on top of the cost of the rifle making this fully work again, I now have what I feel to be a pretty competent rifle. The upgrades I have in this specifically, I have a 6.05 steel inner barrel. I have a 4 AUD hop booking. If you can see the orange rubber in there, distinct of the 4 AUD brand. It has been fairly good. With the RA Tech locking plastic nozzle, I now get some pretty consistent shooting in terms of reliability for pressure. And with the new bolt, this is now a very happy rifle. Things to look out for, especially if you're buying second hand. This pin here that holds the mag release in likes to start to wander. And this pin here likes to start to bend. KY Airsoft sells full replacement kits of this part, so just keep an eye on it. In theory, every time the bolt travels back, it kicks the whole system backwards, long before the bolt gets there. However, if this starts to bend in any way, what can happen is it starts to go back, this stays in place, and then now the whole system is under pressure as it gets twatted by the back of the bolt. If that starts to happen, disassemble this immediately. Do not keep operating the gun. Or, at the very least, push it out the way. Now, that is not to say that I have only bad things to say about this rifle. It is pleasant to shoot, it is comfortable to hold in the hands, and now that I have sorted out the gas efficiency issues, I can get 4 full mags before I need to recharge the gas. Just, it's a buyer's beware. Be careful who you buy from, and make sure that you have a recourse if they ship you something that is not the condition they said it is. Now, I've left the person's name out for sake of protecting the guilty. Something libel and all that jazz. That is deliberate. Don't go chasing people, don't go harassing anyone. And if you want advice on where to buy from, well, I've given you the question that you need to ask. After that, good luck. If you need somewhere to get, if you need advice on where to get something new, I can happily give you that in the comments. If you're looking for spare parts for a WE, KY Airsoft has them all. Again, I'm not sponsored, it's just sometimes when you have something like a niche hobby, there's only one place you can get the stuff reliably and consistently. If you've got any questions or if you want to see any follow-ups, just let me know. Maybe it'll be less than a year and a half before I upload again.